welcome to the Art of Being Human. We're continuing our series on distressing events that are happening and how we respond to them and our own nervousness and anxiety, all the things that we respond to. You need to remember, and I am surprised by people who say, oh, this happens to me and there's no reason, I don't know why I feel this way. There's no such thing as a symptom without a cause. If you're having symptoms of anxiety and depression, there's a reason for it. Now, that doesn't mean you necessarily understand the reason for it. And when you decide that you know, it doesn't mean that you're accurate in your own diagnosis as to what's going on. But you may be, because you may have enough self-awareness to be able to see what's going on. You know, there is such a thing as self-awareness, that you are afraid of something and you know what it is and you know why, and you can practically diagnose yourself. Unfortunately, just diagnosing yourself doesn't necessarily bring healing, but I do think it's a necessary first step. And a lot of people don't have self-awareness. They don't understand, oh, you know, I'm feeling this, why am I feeling this? And they don't want to feel it, but they also don't want to find out why, because it scares them. So then they try to mask it. They try to stop it. Oh, I'm not going to feel fear. I'm not going to feel this. I'm not going to feel that. I'm just not going to do it. I won't allow myself to do it. But then what do? They start to self-medicate. They drink too much, or they get involved with drugs. And some of it is to mask all of those feelings. I had one of my high school students when I was teaching high school, and she was nervous. I don't know if she ever got help with it. It wasn't to the level that she was behaving oddly or anything, but she had with her aspirin. She had a bottle of aspirin and she carried it with her. Every time she felt too nervous, she popped an aspirin. Well, it's not a good idea. Aspirin is a powerful drug on its own, and it does a lot of good things, but you wouldn't want to overdose on aspirin like you wouldn't want to overdose on anything else. But that was her remedy for her fearing. Just have something you can take. And for her, it's easy enough to get. You could buy it anywhere. So she would have aspirin with her, and I would see her occasionally pop an aspirin. Maybe she thought it was doing her some good. Maybe she thought it was calming her down. There are some people who carry medication with them that they can use in case they have to use something because their anxiety level is so high. And what they do is they keep it in their pocket or whatever. And when they are nervous and they seem bogged down, they'll tell themselves, they'll use a little self-talk, which I think can be used very helpfully. Self-talk is when you talk to yourself as if you were a therapist, or as if you were your parent, or as if you were somebody that has authority that you can rely on, and you kind of adapt that kind of talk. And say, you know, I have it if I need it, but I'm going to put it off. I may not need it. I'm going to try to get through without it. But if I have to have it, it's like an emergency. I have it in my pocket. I can't take it. I'm not doing anything wrong by taking it. But if I can stretch it out and not take it so much, then I can gain more control. And some people do that. That can be helpful. Self-talk can be helpful, but you have to know how to use it right. If you're going to use self-talk and you're talking to yourself like you're another person talking to yourself, it needs to be positive, realistic, and not negative, and never demeaning. Don't demean yourself. I'm no good, why didn't I do this? I'm no good, why didn't I do that? I can't do anything right. We have kids growing up and they're always thinking, well, I didn't do it right. What's wrong with me? I'm not very good. People don't like me. I'm not perfect. I can't do this, I can't do that. And they get very demeaning. When you say you're not worth something, you know, it's a difference between saying, I made a mistake or I am a mistake. It's that kind of a difference. I made a mistake. I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have done that. But I can grow from that. I can recover from that. I can become better from that. It's not going to be a death knell. It's not going to affect me so much that I can't recover from it. But if you continue on the road of, I'm not very good, I'm not a good person, I should have known better, but I didn't know better. You know, people blame themselves. And a lot of times they blame themselves over things that they don't have control fearful of. I should have thought of that. Well, we can't think of everything. We're human beings. You know, one girl came to me and said, what are people going to think of me if I hug a tree? I just feel like hugging a tree. And I said, well, what they're going to say is, look at that attractive girl. She's hugging a tree. And they're not going to think any more than that. You know, they're not going to put any more meaning to it than it has. They're just saying you do something and you're doing it, so that's all right. I mean, you're not in any danger. You're not putting anybody else in danger. You know, so people come up with things. And I had one person who admitted to me that when she felt like she was in a tight spot and she was getting anxious, she would pretend that she was me. And she would say, what would she say, referring to myself? What would she say to me to get me over the hump? So she started talking to herself. And then she admitted to me that the things she was telling her turned out to be nothing that I actually would say. But the thing is, she was kind of on the right track, because you can move yourself through a situation by self-talk to a certain degree if you're using it correctly. And we do use self-talk without realizing it. We're always thinking to ourselves this or that or the other. I'm good, or I did that, or I should have done that, or why didn't I do that, or I'm glad I did that. We're always doing it. We just don't recognize it for what it is. So turn it around and make it a helpful thing. And if you go to a therapist, they can probably show you how to use it, you know, in an accurate, in a good way. So at any rate, you have to remember, and as I started to say before, there's no such thing as a symptom without a cause. And things just don't come out of the blue, although they seem to. The anxiety symptoms that you have, if they're pronounced enough, become your reality, and you start to believe in what your anxiety is telling you, and that's a mistake. You know, I'm not, this is kind of a made-up situation. If I'm retired now, supposedly, but if I had a job and I went into the job every day and I say, this is the day I'm going to get canned because of this, that, or the other, I'm going to start thinking of myself as having less worth, because what did I do? What am I doing that I'm fearful that someone is going to fire me for something? You know, but with this world that we're in and downsizing and all of that, there's always a possibility that my job will be eliminated. That's realism. But to say, well, I can't be worth that much because if they pick me to let go instead of somebody else, it proves that I'm not that good a person. That wouldn't be an accurate thing to do. That would not be a good thing to do. You need to build yourself up, not tear yourself down. So in terms of self-talk, if you decide to use it, that's fine. But make sure you do not demean yourself. And in your relationships with other people, don't demean anybody else. Everybody has worth. You can't demean other people and maintain any kind of friendship. A person can make a mistake. It doesn't mean that they are a mistake. It doesn't mean that they shouldn't be here. They just made a mistake. You know, so think of your symptoms as your body telling you something about yourself, and pay attention to it, but don't let it control you. The anxiety, the symptoms that you feel, if they become your reality and you start believing in your anxiety, you're going to develop a fear. The fear you're going to develop is having fear. Nothing is worth having fear over. So you're fearful you're going to lose your job. What are the symptoms of fear? Well, you become anxious, you become nervous, you might become depressed, and then after a while, you fear the fear. You know, and you're not so much fearing the situation, but you're fearing the symptoms that you have because of the situation. And you separate the two. There's the situation and there's the anxiety resulting from it. And after a while, what you want to do is get rid of the anxiety. You want to get rid of your symptoms. So I'm going to take a look at this chart here, and this first chart. It's like I just made it as a triangle. I just called it the cycle of fear. Supposing an event happens. It could be a single event, or it could be repeated. And that causes you symptoms of fear, anxiety, and worry. then the symptoms of fear, anxiety, and worry become your reality. You live with them every day. I'm fearful. And then what happens? You have to seek help or do something to stop the symptoms. You're not so interested in what's happening that caused it to begin with, which is way up here. You're interested in getting rid of the symptoms. And a lot of people who go into counseling have a lot of symptoms, and they want help with the symptoms. If you ask them, why do you feel this way? It's a natural question to ask. They may or may not know. If they don't know, they may make up something that seems logical. Well, maybe it's because of this, or maybe it's because of that. But you don't know for sure. They don't know for sure, because now they've lost touch with this, and they're totally consumed with this. In other words, I have the symptoms of anxiety and depression, and that has become my reality, and now I'm fearful when I wake up in the morning because I don't want to experience this. You know, medication has been a wonderful help in psychotherapy. People who need to take medications should take them. You know, there's a reason why they exist. And if they're helpful, they're helpful. The one downside of medication would be the fact that it might prevent you from going and learning about the original thing that caused the symptoms to begin with. So you have your event, whatever it is, it causes you symptoms, fear, anxiety, worry, and then the symptoms become your reality. You become afraid of those symptoms, and you seek help to get rid of the symptoms. You don't necessarily get help to get rid of this or to work with this. It's all getting rid of symptoms so you can function. And that's where you stop growing. We are an energy system, and we grow and we develop. Only the thing is, if something is worrying us and we're focused so much on it, our growth may stop. I tell people that in a good marriage relationship, then the people are free to support each other as they grow and they develop and become a fuller person. And they can support each other in that process. But if anything stops the relationship, if anything damages the relationship of the couple with each other, the growth stops. And all the energy is poured into trying to maintain what they've got. So you stop the growth, and the energy is to help maintain what you already have. So there's no progress that way. In this, I'm saying that an event occurs and it causes the symptoms become your reality, and then you become fearful of the symptoms. Now, you may be in touch enough to know what all of this is about, but you may lose touch with it and be concerned basically with your symptoms, and then you have to seek help to stop the symptoms. A lot of people wonder why psychologists kind of dig into the past so much. Well, sometimes you have to, because the sources of their anxiety and their illnesses and their depression goes way back to a cause, because there's no such thing as having a situation that there hasn't been a cause of. There's no symptom that doesn't have a cause. So if you have a symptom, there's a cause of it. And as the symptoms increase and you become fearful of the symptoms, you get help to try to stop the symptoms. But you may not think in terms of what's behind it. You know, I've got symptoms, there's a reason for it. Well, the reason might be physiological. Something's wrong with your hormonal balance, something's wrong with the neurotransmitters, your body is not in balance, you've lost homeostasis, or it could be something that's happened to you. And remember, mind and body act as one. Something that happens to you can change the nature of how you think, how you feel, how you perceive things. And so we are dealing with something that has happened to you, either within your body or something that has happened to you externally. We need to know what it is for healing to occur. And the good news is that for everything, usually there's a cure. Usually people can be brought back to where they need to be, and they can have symptom relief. Even in the case of PTSD, which is really a reaction to trauma, and is probably the worst things that we deal with, you can still get healing for it. different types of techniques and different types of methods, which I'll be touching upon. So you get the help, and then you're back and you feel much better. So that's the way that it runs. So what you have to do is try not to be afraid of the symptoms. The symptoms can be frightening, but try not to be afraid of the symptoms, and think of it as your body letting you know something. It's trying to communicate with you. And if you can recognize it, and if you can acknowledge it, then all of a sudden the intensity goes down. Now, I read a story, this is kind of an aside, I'm just thinking about it now, about a pastor who had a problem, and he had a nervous breakdown. He had all kinds of symptoms. He had been involved in something that he shouldn't have been involved with, and he had turned his life around, but he had all of these symptoms. And so as he went through that time where he called it a nervous breakdown, when it came for anxiety, he imagined that there was a wave of water splashing over him. And when the anxiety was at its worst, it was like the water was splashing over him in a wave, and then it recedes, like waves of an ocean. They come in, they crash, they recede, and go back out to sea. And as he thought about that visualization, it helped him. Because when the anxiety was the worst, it's like the wave was over him, and then it would recede, and his symptoms would recede. And he used that kind of imagery to help himself to get better. And eventually, of course, he did get better. It is in the nature of the human being that the human body wants to heal, tries to heal, will do whatever it can to heal. And it does happen. Now, I want to go over the types of anxiety. We have time for that. And these are the different types of anxiety that most people have. And I'm just going to kind of define it for you. One of them is just called general anxiety disorder, GAD. It's a chronic thing, very high anxiety, very nervous, and it doesn't seem to be tied to any event. This is where a person comes to you and says, I'm so anxious, I'm so nervous, I can't get over it. Well, do you know what's causing it? No, it just seems to come out of the blue. And that's the way that it feels. It's like an attack of anxiety, and it comes out of the blue, and you suffer with it until it goes away. But there's a reason for it. And so in therapy, you would be hunting for the reason. But it is a very difficult thing to go through because it becomes chronic. It becomes very chronic. Then you have the phobic disorders. In phobia, there is an irrational fear of something that probably will not hurt you. You know, some people are afraid to go across bridges, and the bridge isn't going to do anything to you, but they're terrified of going across the bridge. And what has happened is something has happened to them in their past, and it has kind of solidified as a fear, and they're fearful of that thing. Maybe they got into an accident, a car accident, when I was driving over the bridge, or something like that. Or a simpler form would be, supposing you're bitten by a dog or another animal, now you're fearful of dogs. You don't want to be with a dog. You're afraid of dogs. They might bite. And it's like a simpler response to something that actually happened, but it caused you to be fearful of that one thing that happened. It caused you to be fearful enough that you are afraid anytime that you're in the presence of a dog. But it doesn't bother you at other times. You're not fearful all the time. You're only fearful at the time when you're in the presence of the thing that causes you to fear. So if it's animals or dogs or cats, the thing is some of these fears kind of spread. You might be afraid of a dog because a dog bites, but then you might be afraid of a cat because cats can bite too. And then what about other animals? They all have 4 legs and a tail. You end up by increasing your fear, so you don't get rid of it. So you need to have help to get rid of that fear. Sometimes a phobia will be a complex phobia, and it's not just that one thing. There are several things that have happened, and they kind of all gel together, and symbolically, you're afraid of something. Now, one case I sometimes bring up, and it was a friend of mine who couldn't go downstairs. She's terrified of going downstairs. She could go upstairs. Now we were in a psychology unit. We were studying psychology. We were in a psychology class together, and she was, and it was on the top floor of a building, and there was no elevators. You had to go up the steps. She could go up the steps. She couldn't go down. She would have to sit down on the step and move down in a sitting position, one step after another step after another step. And we finally we discussed it. Now, I wasn't doing any therapy at the time. I was just a student like she was, but we discussed it, and we discovered her father was an airplane pilot, and he had his own plane. And he would fly up, and he would fly around her house and tip his wing. It's like, hello, just acknowledging her. And she'd sit there and wave, and the wingtip would go down. Well, once the wingtip went down and the plane crashed, her father died in the crash. So she saw the plane go down, and her father died in that particular crash. So what that was symbolic was her going down the steps was symbolic, or became symbolic, of her father losing his life as he acknowledged her, but the plane went down. The stairs go down. She could go up. The plane would go up. She couldn't get back down. The plane crashed coming down, and that was the connection. When she realized that, when we discussed that and we realized that, then she was able to get help to be able to go downstairs so that she would be all right after that. It took some therapy, I think, probably for her to accomplish that, but at least we knew what was going on. And then after that, you see, she could get the help she needed. Well, we're kind of running out of time, so I'm going to close it here. But remember, there's no such thing as a symptom without a cause. So we'll close it here. Please join me next time.